beside the sea. Such a very large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat on the sea and sat there, while the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. He began to teach them many things in parables, and in his teachings he said to them, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. Other seeds fell into good soil and brought forth grain, growing up and increasing, and yielding 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And he said, Let anyone with ears to hear listen." When he was alone, those who were around him along with the 12 asked him about the parables. And he said to them, "Do you not understand this parable? Then how will you understand all the parables? The sower sows the word. These are the ones on the path where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. And these are the ones sown on rocky ground. When they hear the word, they immediately receive it with joy. But they have no root and endure only for a while. Then, when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. And others are those sown among the thorns. These are the ones who hear the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth and the desire for other things come in and choke the word, and it yields nothing. And these are the ones sown on the good soil. They hear the word and accept it, and bear fruit 30 and 60 and 100-fold. The word of the Lord.
Well, good morning. This is the first time I've really had the opportunity to address you since the summer. And at this point, summer seems a dim memory in the distant past. But for one moment this morning, I'd like to bring it back and share with you what I did and some reflections on my summer. My husband and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. And for those of you who've heard me speak before, you know that we are big hikers. So to celebrate our anniversary, we did what we love to do and traveled out west to the Grand Tetons and enjoyed 8 days of communing in the great outdoors. The highlight of it was a hike that was 18.78 miles, trek to Lake Solitude. So these are the Grand Tetons, beautiful light at sunset, and we go one more. Through this canyon, you go this 18 miles through this canyon to Lake Solitude. When you're on the trail that long during the day, with only your husband of 25 years, you don't do much talking necessarily, but you do a lot of thinking. And at some point, your thoughts give way, and you start absorbing what is around you. And when you're in nature this grand, you feel small, and your human troubles seem small by comparison. We made it to the lake. If you want to go through snow at the top, there's snow, and you're in your shorts and trekking through snow up there at the top. Little marmots were running around in the snow, and there were about 3 or 4 other groups of people that we saw when we got up there, one of whom, talk about small world story, was a family with a young woman, and I said, "Oh, where do you go to college?" I mean, we are 18 miles off of, in the Grand Tetons in Wyoming. She goes, "I go to Davidson College." I went, "You're kidding. My daughter is going to start." Davidson has 2,000 students. What are the chances of that? But anyway, that's where we met. So in addition to hiking on this trip, we tried something entirely new. Fly fishing. Don't go yet. Oh well, you can go. I just like the other picture better because this is not the most attractive picture of me. But anyway, we spent several nights in Idaho. Add that to the McGehee bucket list. Learning how to cast and eventually going on an all-day fishing trip on the Snake River. Now, I must confess that I was nervous about fly fishing for several reasons. First, I had this image of fly fishing as a totally quiet experience for serious sportsmen, and I worried that I would not be able to stay quiet that long, given how much I talk, and you all know that about me. I'm a huge extrovert. And that I would get bored pretty easily just standing there waiting for a fish for the entire day. What if I didn't catch anything? And second, cats casting is not easy, I was told. Your lines get tangled, you can whack yourself with hooks in the back of the head, which I did a couple times. It doesn't feel that good, but it's all right. And I was afraid that out in this, real sportsman-like territory, I would look pretty stupid. Well, first we got some lessons, and here I am having a lesson. The instructors were immensely helpful. Our instructor gave us some easy mnemonics. They were great teachers to help us remember what to do with our arms and wrists. Hello, goodbye, hello, goodbye. And we cast, and we're told how to hold the line with our thumbs, and they gave us visual tips, make a J, to let us know how to place our thingamabob, and truly that is a word. It's just so in the water. They gave us time to practice. And here I am practicing casting in the pond, and what I didn't know, the very first time I put it in, they stock this pond, but the very first time I put it in, this huge fish grabs my line and of course takes it, and I had no idea what to do, but anyway. Then on the day of our big trip, we met our guide, Eric, and as he drove us to our drop-in point on the Snake River, he told us all about this incredible vast land of Idaho that was around us, and how it was settled. He told us about how developers wanted to turn the farmland into river luxury homes, and about how Mark Rockefeller bought that property and deeded it to the Nature Conservancy, much as his grandfather had done to preserve other parks, including the Grand Teton National Park. We learned about people who settled out west, including Eric's grandfather, who came to Idaho during the Dust Bowl. And I could go on, but for me, this was history that I'd only read about, and it was coming true before my eyes. Now, when I got on the water, I realized I had, in fact, retained the instructions we got in our fly fishing classes, with some additional support from Eric, my mentor guide, and I learned a few more tricks from him. I learned about 4 different kinds of trout. I learned how to spot insects in the water and to cast near them. We saw eagles' nests. It was incredible. And you can go for it. You see, there I am on the river. And then one more. There's the first fish. I was so excited. Casting in this gorgeous water was mesmerizing, and the time flew by. We caught over 22 fish. I was in the lead most of the day, and then Reed took over at the end. But I got the only 2, the rainbows, that we could keep and eat. That's a big one. And no, that's not a member of the Taliban or my husband, that's Eric. He is a professional skier in the winter, so he wears this protection to keep the sun off of his face because he's just been burned so much. But anyway, I got the only 2 we could eat, and there was something so incredibly and deeply satisfying about catching your own dinner. I felt part of the landscape and part of a pioneer tradition that lived off the land, even if it was just for a moment. It was beautiful and simple, and I said, honey, we gotta do this in Virginia, and he reminded me we wouldn't have Eric, and I'd have to learn to cut my own lines. Not so sure about that. Maybe, we'll get there. Okay, jump forward a few weeks to our July 4th week in the mountains. Now, contrasting to the peace of the river, we started hearing this frightening noise near our house at night. Take a listen.
LS catalog number 50147.
It was much louder than that. That's good, Liddy. This haunted me all night for a couple of weeks. We couldn't figure out what it was. We weren't sure what type of animal or bird it was, whether it was even a bird. And so one evening, sitting on our back porch in the dark, we decided to check out bird sounds, although, like I said, we weren't entirely sure it was a bird. We found some cool bird apps and websites, and eventually we matched the sound to this bird. Not maybe what you're thinking, a screech owl, but a barn owl. And let's go one more forward because this video will be forever in your memory. That's what I was hearing all night long. That's a mating call. Well, this experience in nature totally sparked our curiosity about barn owls. I read all I could about them, and I'm now a pretty big expert on barn owls. And I will not bore you with details about barn owls, but one night we went out in an effort to find this creature. And we finally saw it soaring in the dark, and I don't have a nighttime picture of it flying, but I do have a daytime picture. You can see the wingspan. We found it soaring in the dark, and it landed on top of this mighty fir tree in our front yard. And as we flashed our light on it, it peered down on us, a bit frightening to be sure. It's a big bird, but it was majestic. And now we're the proud owner of an owl house. See, we've learned that they're quite helpful in ridding one of rodents, and they tend to come when there's a high rodent population. And in fact, we have, I know y'all are going to be really upset, this is going to upset some folks out there. We have too many chipmunks, they're destroying our yard. So, you know, let nature take its course. So, by the way, we opted to try to attract screech owls that don't screech rather than barn owls that do screech. They do the same thing in terms of killing rodents. So you're probably sitting here wondering, where's this boy, Mrs. McGehee, besides great stories about your summer? Well, in August, as I was planning for this year and meeting and discussing goals and talking with teachers about the school year, it struck me that this summer had been a real gift. I had had the kind of learning experiences that your teachers and I aspire for you to have, full of whys and wonders, but which sadly you often don't have as you get older, and you certainly have less of it as an adult. My learning was out in nature. It was experiential. It was sparked by my curiosity. I had the opportunity to research further and to have an expert mentor guide, Mount Patalon, help my learning. Eric was incredible. I used technology to support my learning. I had time for reflection and connection. But there's something else too that I realized about me. When I was open to this type of learning, I got so much more out of my experience. When I explored the things that made me curious, what I learned stuck with me. When I was still and gave myself time for reflection, I gained so much more and I retained so much more. So in the gospel lesson that was assigned for this past Tuesday, the situation is a little humorous from a teacher's point of view, and I don't know if the teachers caught that moment where Jesus is saying, "You want me to explain the parable?" Jesus is using a story about a farmer sowing seed to teach about faith and salvation. And clearly his disciples are still literal learners. They have to ask him to explain. I think Jesus' parable applies to learning for school, too. A learner has to be ready to learn in order to gain long-term understanding. The things I learned this summer did not fall on hard ground or get choked in weeds. I pushed myself to do something new and uncomfortable. I had real-world experience. I found relevance for my learning. I didn't cram for one test and then lose what I'd learned simply because it had no roots and no context. I didn't let the demands of my very busy life and the world around me interfere. And it would have been easy to do. Rather, I was open to learning. I was curious. I cultivated my own learning experience by spending time on it, reading and reflecting. And most of all, I found joy in this learning. It was really fun. All of this, and so much more, is my wish for you and your teacher's wish for you for this year. And you can achieve this kind of learning in so many different ways. And my charge to you is this. Yes, you will have work, and you will have hard work, and some of it you don't want to do, but we know you need to do it. But if you are finding yourself only grinding away, going through the motions, please see your teachers and talk to them about what interests you. Find a nugget that holds appeal and talk to them about that. They want to help you find connections that make your learning real and relevant and joyful in order to help you develop and flourish in school, college, but most importantly, in a purpose-filled life. So, my warmest wishes to you this year. Amen.
Let us stand and pray. the peace of new beginnings, the peace of heaven's kiss, to welcome us to this day, to root us in this day, to free us for this day, that we may grow with the greening earth, that we may grow from the ground of glory, that we may grow in grateful wonder of you. Gracious giver of this day, great giver of this new day. Bless us as we pray the prayer your Son taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen. You may be seated.
Morning, y'all. Reminder, today is the last day to buy homecoming t-shirts. Captain Andrew and I will be selling them during break in the Commons today. They're $10 per student. Also, a reminder from a personal note, I almost got a parking ticket for parking on Maple over by the school the other day, and part of my agreement with the police officer is that I would tell people not to park.